Man, it's weird to wear clothes I didn't make. So last week we got started on a series where we're taking a look at making it our default setting to paint dramatic light, which by the way, thanks to everyone who commented on that video wishing my mom a happy birthday. We had a wonderful weekend. I baked her a butterscotch cake and it's probably the best cake I've ever baked. But anyway, so far we've taken a look at creating just one super dramatic single key light, which by the way, if you've missed that video, I'll leave it up here. You need to watch it first. It's knowledge that we're gonna build on today. But in today's video, I want to take a look at adding a secondary key light. And contrary to what you might think, it is not the same as adding just a copy of the primary key light. We want to add it in a very subtle, nuanced way so that it enhances the painting rather than washing it all out. Now, today we're gonna do some more drills, but unlike last week, we're not just gonna stick to some basic 3D forms. Today, I actually want to do the drills on a human base head. I've created a base head that you can download. I'll leave a Google Drive link in the description below, which this is something I do with my Patreon tutorials all the time, so I thought I'd do it for you guys as well. But feel free to paint your own base head, but again, if you can't be bothered, you can download the transparent PNG down below and paint along with me. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and learned something today, please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment below letting me know which drills you prefer, this base head one or the basic 3D forms. Which one do you like better? Let me know in the comments below. But without much further ado, let's take a look at painting dramatic lighting part 2. Here's the base head we're going to use today. Like I said, I've added a drive link to this file in the description below. Feel free to download it and paint along. I've rendered her in a rather flat, diffuse light so it doesn't interfere with the drill. Like we did last week, let's start with the grayscale version. I've gone ahead and copied the head a couple of times just to test out a few key light options. Now, because this is in grayscale, we're not too worried about color picking. So a really quick way to light this is to duplicate the layer and either darken it in the levels menu or, and this is what I prefer these days, you turn down the lightness in the hue saturation menu. I prefer this method for darkening things because it actually gets rid of a lot of details, and that is something you actually want in the shadows, is for the details to disappear and the shapes to kind of merge into a big complex mass of shadow. So now that it is all in shadow, what we're gonna do is apply a transparency mask to it. Anything painted white in the mask is visible and anything painted black is invisible. This is how we're going to add our primary key light like we did last week. I'm using that chalk brush from Ahmed's brush set for this, painting black areas into the mask, and you can see how it is revealing the lighter layer underneath. So I'm gonna place the key light at a few different angles, and these are lighting setups I really don't usually paint, so it's really fun to try it out in these drills. And now we get to look at our secondary light. There's 3 important attributes you want to remember when it comes to adding in a secondary light. First and most important, the secondary light is not going to be as bright or as hard-edged as the primary key light. So look what happens when I use the same brush and intensity as the key light to paint in the secondary light. It's too much, right? It just looks like broad daylight now, no drama. Instead, you want to use a softer brush. I'm going to grab an airbrush here and use a lighter hand to gently diffuse in the secondary light. If you have decent brush control, it should be easy to keep it subtle while still using black on the mask, but if you know you have a heavy hand, you can always switch to a grey when diffusing the secondary light in, and it won't matter how hard you press, it will always be softer than the key light is. So number 1, the secondary light should ideally be softer and less intense than the primary key light, just so they're not competing. The second nuance is in the positioning. Now, technically, you could position the secondary light anywhere, but our goal here is drama. And drama means your secondary light is there to enhance the key light, not cancel it out. So when it comes to placing the secondary light, aim for areas of shadow, areas that do not overlap the ones lit by the key light. I personally like to place the secondary light in areas that are directly opposite the key light, especially if I can use it to enhance some of the forms in the shadow. Before we dive into the third nuance, let's go in and add some color to our heads here, because the third point has to do with color. Big shout out to the Medieval Man 9, by the way, for suggesting the use of some super wild colors with the drills. That's what we're gonna do today. So instead of just painting skin to be a skin tone, we're gonna go a little crazy with it. I'm gonna start by creating a new layer set to color blending mode and painting flat base tones for each head. This gives us a nice starting point, because then we're gonna go in and paint in our key lights, the primary key lights that is, to be a complementary tone to the base color. And now for nuance number 3. When it comes to your secondary light, color it to be the opposite temperature to the key light. So if you have a warm key light, create a cool tone secondary light and vice versa. This one isn't necessarily a rule, but rather an aesthetically pleasing suggestion, because if you notice, when it comes to the nuances to your secondary light, the one running theme in all of them is how it contrasts the primary key light in every way. It is diffused and subtle, while the primary key light is hard-edged and intense. It is in the opposite position as the primary light, and so contrasting the temperature of it as well is another way to really push the difference between the two light sources. So with the drills sufficiently drilled into our minds, let's now see how we can apply this to a full illustration. Alrighty, let's talk about this painting. First off, I'm gonna warn you, it went through a couple of huge changes to the color palette, but we'll get to that. I started with a sketch of how I wanted the pose and facial features to be. It wasn't a super detailed sketch at all, just a rough indication of the character. And then, like we did last week, I started with a shadow tone, a deep indigo, to block the silhouette in, then used a complementary bright tone and the chalk brush to paint in the bright key light. I did still keep it coming down from the top right, so the bottom left is in shadow, which means our secondary light is gonna hit the bottom left. And again, remember, we want the secondary light to be the opposite temperature as the primary light, so I went in with a cool tone, almost a turquoisey blue. And you'll notice that with the secondary light, because it is the opposite temperature as the key light, it actually ends up being the same temperature as the shadows. And this just brings us back to the idea of the secondary light being there to enhance the key light, not compete with it. Because now, instead of being another complementary light source that is the opposite temperature as the shadow, it is simply a bit of brightness within the shadow that still drives focus to the areas of the key light. I could have just gone with a paler version of the shadowy indigo blue, but I'm personally trying to focus on making a habit out of shifting hues more often, so I went a little greener with it. Also, like we saw earlier, the secondary light is gonna be softer and more blended out than the primary light, so I definitely painted it with an airbrush. I really loved adding this light because it allowed me to show off the forms in her jaw and shoulder, as well as some details in her hair. I definitely wanted to give her some more contrast, and so her hair and eyebrows are going to be much paler than her skin. I think it adds a really cool otherworldly look. Now, this is the point where I decided to hue shift the whole painting and see if we can get an even more interesting color palette. And I initially settled for this red, green, and purple one, though eventually I did shift it again. I definitely didn't want her to have skin that looked the color of any human skin, and the reds felt a little too human for me. I also felt like her silhouette was too boring, too many large rounded shapes, so I decided to give her a weapon weapon strapped to her back. This weapon went through a whole array of changes as well. Can you tell it was an anxiety week? No, but seriously, I had a super anxious weekend, which I've been medicated for so long I'd forgotten how it feels to be anxious. Spoiler alert, not good. Anyway, the reason I mentioned this is because the weekend alone was so exhausting that the yucky feeling rolled over into the start of the week, and it felt like everything was frozen in time. Nothing was working with me at all. And you guys, I was legitimately on the verge of a breakdown when, out of nowhere, I looked out the window that's right next to my desk, and I kid you not, like 12 butterflies flew right across my window, almost in like a swarm. I'd never seen that before. It was so weird to see so many of them together, and to me, butterflies are usually a sign from the universe that things are changing. And then pretty much overnight, everything switched back right on track. My mind was clearer and calmer, and now it's like the weekend never even happened. And so while this painting started off as a random piece just to demonstrate dramatic lighting, I eventually went on to throw in a fantasy butterfly-like insect in there as the source of light. And then the story kind of took form to where this is a civilization riddled with war, setting everything on fire, destroying each other. And then the butterflies show up with their glowing auras, instantly spreading peace to the entire planet. Our main character, a warrior, looks up at one such butterfly, shocked that nature itself has passed an armistice of sorts, and relieved that this means no further bloodshed. This is amity. And there we have it. That is pretty much the majority of light sources you'll ever come across in your art career. That said, however, next week we're going to take a look at really punching up your lighting setups with some super cool, unusual light sources, and also some rendering tips that will really take your art to the next level. So make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell turned on so you don't miss the next video when it drops. If you enjoyed this video and learned something today, I would super appreciate a like and would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. If you'd like to support this channel directly, feel free to check out my Patreon for exclusive content, or just grab some merch and prints. I'll leave all the links in the description below. I also have links to my Instagram and Discord where you can just come say hi to me if you like. But that's about all I have to say today, so thank you so much for hanging out and hopefully painting with me today. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Check out some more videos up here, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!